Any open forum people? I do not believe there are, or is. Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Gary LaRude. You know the rules, I think.
I think you all know who I am. The sheets that I've placed before you there, you'll notice, are double-sided. And this is an explanation of why the flag of the United States is presented to the widow or the next of kin at the burial of a veteran. I feel that this should be at least a small part of our American history as a free country. I'm wondering if this is included as part of our American history curriculum in our grade schools. If not, I feel that it should be. There is absolutely no political content in this whatsoever. This is all part of our American heritage. I'll be around at the close of the meeting for any questions you might have. I eagerly await your response, and I thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Gary. And as you know, it's inappropriate for us to respond directly at this time, but thank you for your comments. Moving on to the approval of today's agenda, we have, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll move to approve.
Moved by Kim.
Second.
Seconded by Dave. Any discussion? Items you'd like adjusted? None? All right, all those in favor of the motion to accept the agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion approved. Number 5, we have consent items. Again, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent items. So moved. Moved by Bruce, seconded by Gary. Any questions, issues, items anyone would like removed? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Consent item motion passes. Superintendent report. You are first.
Thank you, Chair, directors, staff, community. It's amazing to sit here on June 20th, and I'll keep bringing this present. This time last year, I was eagerly sitting on the outer skirts of Albert Lea, waiting my opportunity to serve Albert Lea schools. So this is that time I was going through a mental transition, and it won't be long into that year anniversary of the physical transition. So completely blessed for this opportunity. We'll begin with our mission statement: to ensure individual, academic, social, emotional growth that leads to engaged citizens and lifelong learners. We're always learning. And you'll hear in tonight's presentation by Mr. Queener that this is part of our strategic planning, our foundation, and it really propels us to move forward. A couple reports ago, I talked about transition for our organization, and at our buildings, we have 3 brand new instructional leaders. This is due to promotions, as well as those that are moving for family commitments and other reasons. So at Halverson, we went from an interim principal to principal at Halverson, Ms. Kim Larson, which is very exciting. She's already been in that seat and had multiple experiences of leadership in her first couple weeks. Zach Kruger, we welcome him to Lakeview. He's an exciting and eager young man that will bring a lot of new perspective to Lakeview, and look forward to welcoming Mr. Kruger. And finally, at Hawthorne, we have Miss Marie Adams. She was a resource specialist at Hawthorne, but has been moved into the instructional leader, so she will continue the continuity and the great things that are happening at Hawthorne. So we welcome our 3 new instructional leaders and principals. Last report, I talked about organizational realignment. I neglected to recognize, and sitting at, in the driver's seat, if you will, our new administrative assistant to the superintendent of the board, Ms. Darcy Rasmussen. So we're excited to have Darcy. Darcy transitions to us from Hawthorne into the central office, and has not skipped a step, but stepping in. Of course, she has a great coach, Ms. Ashley Matson, that's been working with her. But we welcome Darcy, who will be supporting and is in the driver's seat tonight. So welcome, Darcy. I want to report that Summer Tiger Tales is going strong. This gives you a little perspective of what's taking place. Not only are our students are doing our traditional reading and math, but there's a lot of experiential hands-on learning. Last week, it was exciting. In the lower left, you see that the first graders out in their kayaks, if you will, and having some true experiences. We saw some students that were maybe a little delayed because they were in the trees, or some students that had a little bit of more of an excitement or emotions. But it's amazing partnership with Community Ed and giving our students that experiential learning. You have the literacy, a lot of, in mathematics, a lot of things are tailored to the individual needs of our students, and then the social emotional learning. So it's really exciting that our Summer Tiger Tales is up and running. We also, in secondary, we have credit recovery of approximately 150 students as well. So that's going strong. Our students are really getting a great and a whole experience as we're teaching the whole child during Summer Tiger Tales. And finally, just want to reinforce that during the summer, just continue to read for our students, our staff, the adults across Albert Lee. It's something that you find that place, find that book, find whatever engages you to take that time just to slow down and enjoy summer and read. Read whenever. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Wagner. We'll begin at my left with Bruce.
I attended the Freeborn County Collaborative meeting this month. We spent the whole time talking about the job description for the part-time coordinator we're going to be hiring, so that's about it.
There hasn't been many meetings yet since the last one that I had. I did attend the SEAC meeting last month. That was the end of the year, helping with learning some of the vocabulary for the different terms that they have in special ed, and transitions into the next stage for the next age groups and everything. So very informative. We're trying to line up a few more meetings rather than just 2 a year, but I'm looking forward to that. That's it.
Just had the finance committee meeting here, and I'm sure Jennifer will cover that fully before, and then a couple of MSBA meetings too.
Three committees, business ed, scintillating policy committee meeting, and just completed with finance. I did have the pleasure, I invited John Double to speak to our Lions Club about community ed. We have not had any leadership from community ed speak to our Lions Club, and he did a really nice job. And then trying to wade through School Board Association materials on legislation. So good resources, but boy, there's a lot there. So.
All right, I think it's on. I also attended the scintillating policy committee with Gary. And we covered the policies that are up on the agenda tonight. And I also attended a Schools for Equity and Education meeting where, kind of like what Gary touched on, they're covering some of the changes with the state laws. So I found that to be very interesting, and I also have watched some videos from MSBA trying to find out what all has changed. I'm sure there's a lot I haven't heard yet, but doing my best to keep up on that.
How about now? There we go. Third time's a charm, right? Okay. So I had the opportunity to participate in leadership graduation for the Chamber of Commerce leadership program. And so I was able to hear one of our representatives from District 241, Tyler, the Johnson, the principal from Southwest, and he did a fantastic job. I really enjoyed how he is going to take what he learned and use it within the theme months that they do, and really just engage the community in that, in those opportunities. So it was a different take on that. Those presentations typically are, this is what I learned this year and how I'm going to put it into practice. But he actually gave us the PowerPoint presentation that he gave to his team at Southwest, or will be giving to his team at Southwest. So that was very cool. Sean Gaston was not able to be there, but he had his presentation available on YouTube. So that was great. And I just want to reiterate how important it is to have district personnel in that program. It's a great program for them to learn about the community. So if we have the opportunity to send some folks, that would be great. Then just today, I was able to be part of the HRA candidate forum for a new director for the HRA. And I'm really excited about both of the finalists and their connection to education and the importance of connecting housing to our educational programs. So I'll be working with Jeff Halverson and kind of help bridging that with higher ed as well. So it was a great opportunity, so thanks.
All right. I've been fairly active. I suppose we'll begin with the EFAL, Education Foundation of Albert Lea. And we have 3 events coming up this summer, actually 2. One of them has 2 aspects to it. The Athletic Hall of Fame is July 28th in the evening, I think around 6 o'clock at the Cove. There has been quite a bit of publication about that in the Albert Lea Tribune. And then the Pathways to Success reception. I guess the Hall of Fame is a reception now too, which means it doesn't cost as much as it used to. And our reception for the Pathways to Success is in October on the 12th. That's a Thursday. That involves distinguished educators, of which there are 4, and distinguished alumni, also 4. And the distinguished alumni speak to the students at the high school on the 13th. That's a Friday, ominous date. And that's always been well received. I'm amazed, being a former high school teacher, a little bit nervous about non-teachers or educators speaking to a body of students, especially all the seniors at once. But boy, the seniors are really interested in listening to what their graduates, they are going to be graduates of ALHS, and so they're impressed to hear someone who has had success speak to them. So that's part of what's going on in the FAL. I went to the Marion Ross Theater yesterday for Juneteenth and heard my good friend John Smith. Everybody's John Smith's friend. Most of you probably know him. It was a nice program for the newly established holiday in Minnesota. Also attended a performance of Cinderella, which is, I guess, not a student event, but boy, it sure does include a lot of our former students, and they're very talented. That's on the edge of being a professional production. Cinderella, they did justice to Rodgers and Hammerstein. Teacher grants, I guess that's also EFAL. Today is the deadline. As when I left home, there were 13 applicants for 10 grants, and Lila Oz and I will get busy sorting through those applications presently. That's it. Next, number 9, effective and efficient operations. Strategic planning update. Roy.
Well, good evening, Mr. Chair, Superintendent Wagner, members of the board. It's an honor to be with you this evening and give you a brief update on the strategic planning process that we kicked off earlier this year. We also appreciate the partnership with Albert Lea area schools and being able to be a part of setting the direction for the strategic plan for the future, and then also implementing a system of continuous planning. And so we'll highlight a couple of things this evening. So we're gonna cover a little bit of a overview. I know that Superintendent Wagner had shared with you the process of the classroom to boardroom strategic planning process that we use at TeamWorks. I think this is my 31st planning process I've done since I stepped out of superintendent chair just under 4 years ago. And so we've done a lot of planning with school districts, and so we bring that, not only my background and experiences, but also the team that's been supporting Albert Lee throughout the process. We'll cover a few of the sessions and give you a quick update of where we're at in our process. We are currently in the middle of our pause for the summer, and we'll be picking back up in August. So as a reminder, our process, our classroom to boardroom process, has 3 strands that you see on the left-hand side of the screen. Assessing the reality, so we talk about the story wall, environmental scan, and then we move into the describing the vision, which we've done a little bit of work there, and the other components of that will be picked up in the fall. Not only is this a comprehensive strategic planning process, it is about putting a system of continual planning into the school district. So I tell boards that it's an excellent planning tool, but it's a terrible business model. Because I don't call the superintendent in 3 to 5 years and say, let's do this again. So we put the system in, we support the district, and then really every year you have an up-to-date plan. And we found that to be very valuable for school districts to be able to be flexible so that you can change as needed, but also to be relevant. As a superintendent, when I utilized operational planning, it brought focus and clarity to our work as administrators. So we budgeted, we staffed, and we very much narrowed in on what we do. As an educator, and as a fellow educator, we start a lot of initiatives and we carry them for a long time. And what I found is that when we can really focus on a few and get them complete, we make better progress. So I know you've seen this before, but just as a quick reminder of what we're doing and where we're going. We kicked off the story wall, which was a look back for Albert Lee area schools. We had someone from, I believe it was 1969, 1970 in the room. And so we wrote a story wall around the area that we were in from 1969 to present day, which is a long history. And so we talked about what's happened in that span. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we asked the groups to give us an analysis of that history. The analysis part of what they did is they looked at what are the key events. So what were the big events in those time periods? You can see the little graphic, and I know you got a copy of the report. They listed out all the initiatives that occurred during that time frame. And we asked them, so what's the most influential? And then what behaviors were influenced there? What were rewarded? And then the key parts of what we assessed is we wanted to study where were the successes and where were the challenges and what are the characteristics of both. The idea being that we wanted to replicate success in our planning and mitigate any challenges. So we want to learn from the past to set the stage for the future. And then lastly, we asked the team to give us an assessment of where they thought the district was on a corporate life cycle framework in that time period. And it was really interesting to look across that 50-plus years of time to see where the district was depending on what had happened during their time frame. Story Wall is a lot of fun. It's always interesting to share the history, and I think the group enjoyed the time, and it really set the stage well for a kickoff event for our process. This is something that stands the test of time, and so school districts often use the information in the story wall to talk about their history. And true here, as it is in most situations or most school districts that I'm in, somebody invariably will say, well, that's why we do this. or that's how that got there. And so it's a great history of the district. We shifted gears in the next session to what we call an environmental scan. We also do this in 2 phases. We ask the team to take a look at what are those things that are well established in Albert Lea area schools. What's getting a lot of energy, what's driving the work? What are things that were maybe once well established, but now they're losing energy? We call them ebbing. And we then shifted and talked about what's on the edge, what's on the cutting edge of education, or even just new to Albert Lea area schools. Maybe there are initiatives or ideas implemented elsewhere. And then a really important area are those things that are emerging. So what is the district working on? What is it testing? Because we want to be aware of what's currently in the hopper. After we identify those things, we identify key trends and influences. So what's driving those things? So when we're doing our planning, we want to be aware of things that are giving energy, things that are taking energy away, and how it might impact our plans. So in the edge and emerging area, with community people in the room, we were able to also bring in that community aspect in our planning. So the trends and influences that were driving those issues that were identified in edge and emerging are on the screen. And similarly, those things that are well established and also ebbing, we talked about what's driving those areas. And then we asked the team, as they look at these things, what do they see are key impacts on our planning? And so it's, again, we're setting the stage to build the plan. And so they identified 5 areas under the edge and emerging components that are going to have a key impact on our planning. And then established and ebbing, this text might be a little bit small on the screen. Several items were identified to set the stage for the planning, for the operational planning work that we'll be doing next fall. None of these were really surprising given the current environment that we're still navigating post-pandemic. But it was nice to have such a comprehensive group in these 2 sessions, both staff that have been with the district a long time as well as community representatives as well. Next, we spent a lot of time doing and driving desired daily experiences. So this is a foundational component to our planning process. We worked from March 27th through April 13th. And we used a strategy of identifying some focus groups. We had a focus group from the middle school and also the high school, about 43 students that we talked with. And the difference between traditional strategic planning and the desired daily experience, most of you probably have been through traditional planning where we ask the question, what do you think the school district should do in the next 3 to 5 years? When we asked that question and we populated ideas, some of those ideas were really good. But some are ideas that were really good, but from the last time those folks were in the classroom. And so when we don't implement those ideas, your stakeholders look at you and say, well, why'd you ask us? So instead, the question we ask in desired daily experiences for both students, families, and staff is when you engage with school, when you come to school as a student, when you engage with school as a parent, or when you come to work as a staff member, describe your desired daily experience. And we use that to then build out our strategic plan, our operational plan on delivering that. So we got ideas from 43 students. You're not going to be shocked. The students didn't say increase our rigor and crank up the expectations. That's typically doesn't come from students. They want longer lunches and more time between classes. But what we're seeing from the student perspective is a significant need for social interactions. They're still weaving that post-pandemic. And you'll see that in the draft statements. For our families, we had a couple of groups, about 24 parents. And again, we try to get parents from all variety of students, not just college-bound, but all academic achievement involvement, as demographically diverse as we could. And then for staff, we had about 30 staff members that we met with. We used all of this data to build draft desired daily experiences, and then we sent them out in a survey. So the survey went out to all students, all 612 students, all families, and all staff. So the focus groups were kind of a prime the pump strategy so that we could narrow the attention and have people respond to that. And we did give them an opportunity to add if there was anything missing. And so in the survey, we ran that from April 21st to May 2nd. And for responses, we had about 1,000, a little over 1,000 students respond, give us feedback on those draft statements. 226 families and about 159 staff. So we got a pretty good return on the survey numbers. And the team then, the planning team then took that information and revised the draft desired daily experiences. And that was our last session. We just completed that work. So here are, and we can share this with you so you can have this as well, but here are almost hot off the press draft statements. I think it's been about a month since we did these. So as you take a look at these, you're gonna see some commonalities, especially across all three groups. But these are from what your students are saying. And then when we shift to families, and finally staff. What we'll do next with these statements, we'll reorder them, and we'll also start to look for parallelism across all three groups. And so where there's commonalities, we want them kind of aligned so that when we think of initiatives and work that you're gonna do with your operational plan, we wanna get the biggest bang for the buck, if you will. So if we can look at initiatives and span all three stakeholder groups, we wanna make sure we do that. I know that I got to meet most of you before the meeting, but Dr. Sherry Allen covered for me as I was away with a family emergency on May 1st, and she went over the education leadership system. And again, we do this introduction because it's the theory that's underneath all of the planning instruments that we use with our process. And we talked about excellence in governance and management and consultation, and then giving you an opportunity to learn a couple of tools around how do you navigate the three authorities, and then some strategic planning ideas from what you see as your current strengths and needs, as well as what ought to be for your school district. So that's kind of what we've done. Where we're going, we'll come back September 13th. We'll do a building and department strengths and needs session, another current reality, assessing current reality. This generates a lot of data. We asked the departments to talk about strengths and needs, and also we asked the departments to look at core processes that they do in their departments, and what are the strengths and needs of those core processes. So for example, in your transportation department, or in transportation, routing is a core process. So what are the strengths and needs of the routing core process? The schools will do something similar, but we lead them through what we call a 9-question assessment. So we look for where is student achievement strong, where is student engagement high, and we try to build an assessment of all the schools, as well as strengths and needs at the school base. So this too generates a lot of background data. The next step in the process is to develop the vision card. This will be the instrument that the administration will use to measure progress of implementing the plan. A lot of times in strategic planning or goals, we check the box that we did it, and we really don't know the impact. And so Teamworks, we design the impact, the mechanism to track this on the front end. The superintendent's office then will be charged with looking at the vision card at least annually, looking at the progress made, and then providing a report to the board and the public, interpreting the results and also talking about what else are we doing to make progress if there's places that we're not making steady progress. So we'll have a draft of that in September. And October 11th is the first time that we actually talk about any new work. You'll notice that we've done a lot of collection of data, we've done a lot of background. And October 11th and 25th is when we start talking about, so what is the work we're gonna do over the next 3 years? What do we have to finish? What's been started but maybe is still hanging? What are we implementing? And then what do we wanna study? How are we gonna deliver the desired daily experiences for your stakeholders? We come to the board November 6th and we map out, or we have a conversation about mission, vision, and core values. So we provide the board the information to date, and we ask you to take a look at your mission, your vision, and core values and check for alignment. Are they still aligned? And is there any changes that need to be made, either in the work of the planning team or in your current mission, vision, core value statements? We've slated the action on the roadmap for November 20th, and officially at that point, you have a strategic plan. There's a couple of activities that we like to do as a part of this. We come back and we work with the school board sometime in January to map out a 3-year governance plan. So like the administration is putting together a 3-year operational plan, the board takes a look at what is the governance work the board must do over the next 3 years to pave the way for the plan to be implemented. What policies need to be revisited? What are the fiscal implications, staffing models? So it's a tandem planning tool. So the board has a 3-year plan that drives all of your agendas and your work sessions, your committee meetings, and the administration has the operational plan that drives their work. And then the last thing we do, which is really not necessarily strategic planning related, but we have found that a lot of times school board, people are elected to the school board and they continue what's been the past practice without really thinking about why do we have these committees? Why is this agenda structured this way? And so we provide an opportunity to the board to just take a look at all your practices. How does an item go from committee meeting to work session to board meeting? You may not make any changes. You may at least say, well, let's talk about that. And so we found that's a nice opportunity just to give you an opportunity to talk through those things. And then lastly, a great plan sitting on a shelf does no good. And so we have built a very strategic and detailed implementation process for the district. So we'll lead the school and departments through a planning process that takes the district operational plan and brings it down to, so what is the department work and what is the school work that has to be done? And we use a tool called action cards that will help monitor and track progress of implementation. What's powerful about the action cards is they're not 20-page detailed implementation plans. They're a one-pager. So it's very easy to check on milestones and make sure that the plan keeps moving forward. So that's where we've been. That's where we're going. there's my contact information. If you have any questions, at post tonight, but I would be happy to stand for any questions you have about the process of where we've been or where we're going.
Okay, excuse me. Any questions, comments to Mr. Queener? Angie?
I have one. Back to the desired daily experiences, the list of everything that people had listed. Were those in a particular order? I noticed that safety was on top. I didn't know if that was
No,
ranked highest or, okay.
no, they're literally in the same form that we left them from our last meeting, and so we'll be reordering them. We'll be looking for categorical headings to organize them. So it's truly raw, hot off the press, although it's a month old.
I noticed the survey responses, and I felt like that was a great response rate. Did you feel that that was what you're used to, or?
To be honest, it depends on the time of the year. So spring surveys are hard because there's lots of things capturing people's attention. But the rate was, it was plenty high enough to inform our work. Generally speaking, in census surveys, which is what this is, if it's not 50% or more of the population, it's not statistically significant. So it informs work, not directs it. And so the committee took that in consideration, and what we did see, though, is that those that responded primarily were in favor of what the original statements were, so we didn't miss the mark by much in the focus groups. So it affirmed, kind of the direction. And then the open-ended, of course, is always the things that you might have not thought about, and it did impact some of the changes, but a good response rate.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Queener. I just want to again recognize the facilitation and support as we move forward. And this break over summer is intentional. There's been a lot of information and a lot of data to synthesize in this partnership with the community and staff. So at this point, we absorb this information and then work to make sense of it, come back fresh in the fall, and now trying to put that information to a plan. And also knowing that vision card, the work of our team will be to report to the board. It's not a plan and hope. Hope's not a strategy. This is where we report to the board on our progress. If our strategies aren't working, then what are we going to do differently? So this is some exciting work. Looking forward to re-engaging with this information come September. So thank you, Dr. Queener.
Thank you. I have one question. You mentioned that your plan is a poor business model and that it's once put in place, it's self-perpetuating. I'm assuming that Teamworks will have some involvement over the years as we continue to put in place these plans.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's at the discretion of the school district, but by and large, when we are done with the planning, the district has what it needs to continue. But if there's a desire to have support, frequently I'm called back a year later to do the first update to help them. But it's designed to develop a plan, but really to turn the keys over if a district wants to take it and run with it. And I have half of the districts that I've worked with do that on their own, and a half like to have some assistance as they work through it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on. Long-term facilities management plan, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. Hi. It's long, not to correct you, but it's long-term facilities maintenance, not management, but it's not as exciting as strategic planning, but we'll get through this quick. These forms are really poor. It comes from the state. This is every year we have to go through and the board needs to approve the 10-year plan for keeping our buildings in good shape. What came out this year, if you can see it, it's on line 10. Initial revenue is basically, and if you go under 24, where the yellow is, Actually, one over there. You're at 1.4 million for that year, and then it goes to 1.38, and then it just goes out until 33. And it changes every year. It's a little bit different. It's based on our buildings, our age, how many we have, and also our student count, and they've got some other things in there that the state likes to do. So that's the pot of money that's available to us. Some from the state and some from property taxes from the community. Okay. The next form is, no, not that one. Go to the expenditure. Not the Excel, but do you have that form? Should be in their expenditure, yeah. Which really is really poor to look at, but at the top there in category 1, towards the top there, you have different finance codes. That's used to be, back when Bruce was doing the job, that was your health and safety money. So that's kind of grouped in now with the LTFM money. And that varies a little bit, but not a whole lot. It's right anywhere from 199 to 220,000 a year. It's basically your monies for testing for radon, any asbestos abatement that needs to be done, testing for lead. Every 3 years, the fire marshal comes through, and we have to pay him like 10 grand to walk through our buildings. And it also helps. It pays for our testing of our fire alarm systems, testing of the sprinkler systems, those different items. And then it drops down to category 5, where the rest of ours is. And I know it's real hard to see. And it's split up between building envelope on the outside of the building, some building hardware and equipment, electrical, interior services, might be carpeting or tile, mechanical systems, plumbing, professional services, roof systems, and site projects, which would be outside, like your parking lots, tennis courts, things like that. So if you go across, obviously when we don't plan to be over budget on any year, but we're very close to where it is. And it's always a budget that we usually have 1 or 2 larger projects, and it's kind of how those bids come in. I mean, constructions went up considerably just in the last few years with COVID. And honestly, my plan I always have some money in interior services for classroom carpeting and things like that. And if the bids come in good, we can get some of that done. And if they don't come in very good, then we don't get much of that done. You want to go to the next form? This is my form, yeah, which, again, when you have a 10-year plan, sorry, it's busy, it's a lot there. The top of it is we always have a couple $100,000 from capital that we can use to do. We can use that money for things, not just for maintenance. If we're building out an office, changing an office, something like that, you can use those funds where maintenance, the LTFM money, there's restrictions on, you're just keeping the things going of what you have. You're not building new, okay? I color-coded a little bit. It's by school on the LTFM. Exterior money is in the blue, roofing's in red, parking lots in green. There's one purple there for, it's PDU, that's your pool dehumidification unit. But basically, the next 2 years, our plan is to get that high school roof done. We did it last year, we're doing it this summer, and we're just short of $1 million this year, and we're gonna have to spend $1 million next year and the year after that to get it done. It's a big roof, but it needs to be done. I guess, any questions about any of this?
Did the state pony up any more money because of inflation?
Not that I'm aware of.
I think I know the answer to this question, but when other entities see $1.4+ million for facilities, they can't touch that money, can they? That money's for facilities, you get to spend it, is that correct?
That's correct. Yep. It's not available for anything else. You can't buy books with it or anything like that. Yep.
So do these numbers just update a little bit each year with a new budget type of thing?
Correct.
So,
Yep. Every year it's went down just a little bit every year. We've lost probably 70, 80,000 in the last, and this is, I don't know, Jen, for maybe 5 years old? How long has this been around?
Enrollment
Yeah.
adjusting, and then we get, if our projected enrollment is different than the actual, then down the road, we will get caught, they will catch us up.
What, and maybe this is for Steve or Jennifer, do we have funds for the unexpected? Let's say we lose a boiler, or are there funds set aside for unexpected facility replacement repair?
I do. I mean, I have contingencies in every year. Yeah. Yep. And I mean, 10 years is a long time to plan for these things that you don't know what's happening. I mean, honestly, just last week, we were fixing a boiler at Lakeview that looks like, I mean, it's probably the last time we're gonna be able to fix that. So next summer, we're gonna have to plan. We're gonna have to change some things and plan to replace at least one boiler over at Lakeview. So, I mean, it's living, breathing, you know, like any plan.
Any other questions, comments? All right, this is an action item. We need a motion to approve.
So move.
Moved by Gary,
Second.
seconded by Bruce. Any further questions, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the plan, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
it's your last one, Steve?
My last one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, 9.3, the, excuse me, approval for the 22-23 final budget. Jennifer?
Thank you. So, you got in your board packet, the booklet, if you want a written or paper copy, I do have some of those available, but it's exactly what was in your board packet. So what I'd like to do tonight is go over the final budget for this current year, and if you would, please approve that, and then we will start into next year's preliminary or original budget. Is this working for me? Thank you. Okay, so really very, very minor changes for the current year final budget. And really, those are primarily from amendments to a couple of our federal grants. In the final budget, we have a little over $40,000 in additional revenue budgeted and about $141,000 in expenditure increases. So very little change from the revised budget that you all approved earlier in the spring. So in the revised budget, we were projecting a 12.43% unassigned fund balance. And in the final budget, it is projecting a 12.26%. Whoops, went one. I've gone too far here. Excuse me. This is tricky. Okay, other funds. No changes at all to the other funds. It looks like everything is progressing about where we thought it was when we did the revised budget, as I mentioned earlier this spring. And as a reminder, I just like to put pictures in. My job is so much more than just the money. It's remembering what do these funds support for our students. So it's always a variety of things. And this happened to be our very successful golf team this spring. So looking at these charts or spreadsheets here, as I mentioned, really very little change from the the revised budget earlier this spring. We are projecting, as I mentioned, about a 12.2% unassigned fund balance in excess of our 12% board policy fund balance. You will notice this is for the general fund. We have listed all of the restricted accounts. And as Bruce was mentioning, for instance, restricted for LTFM or long-term facilities maintenance, those funds can only be used for that purpose. And we have other restricted funds that are narrow in their scope. The unassigned, which is the vast majority of our budget, is kind of the rest of the funds that we get. And this is where most of our operations come out of. Then, as I mentioned, looking at food service, community service, building construction fund, those were the bonds that we issued in November that we're currently using for safety upgrades. Our debt service fund, custodial fund, which is just one of our scholarships, and the internal self-insured service fund, which is our health insurance. As you can see, no change to this, but we are still expecting a nice increase to that reserve. And then our other post-employment benefits revocable trust fund. So really, as I mentioned, very few changes for the revised budget. So I would ask the board, Chair Score, and board members, if you would entertain a motion to approve the final 22-23 budget.
Okay, Jennifer, thank you. Let's put a motion on the table. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Dave Klott, seconded by Kim. Any discussion, questions to Jennifer on this? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Jennifer, now for the preliminary budget.
Yes, so for, by law, the school boards are required to approve a adopted or preliminary budget for the coming school year by the end of June. And so that's what we'll be talking about this evening. So highlights of this budget. You know, as we all know, there were lots of changes legislatively, for the most part, very favorable to school districts. We are projecting right now just a slightly lower enrollment for next year. And this does assume that we end up with 237, I know it's kind of an odd number, kindergartners, but that's very consistent to where we've been the last couple of years. Most changes that we're seeing in our enrollment are smaller incoming kindergarten classes than we have graduating senior classes. The compensatory revenue, a very large increase of $1.8 million, and this is based on the number of students that we have that qualify for free and reduced lunches. This year, Minnesota is in a pilot program so that students who are on Medicaid are automatically qualify for free and reduced, and so this, as you can see, pretty dramatically increased our revenue for next year. As you all know from our discussions the last couple board meetings, the general ed formula is increasing 4%. That's the largest increase since I've been in school finance, and next year that increase will be 2%. The state is also funding 44% of our special education cross-subsidy. And our English language learners cross-subsidy is also getting a little bit of additional funding, $192,000. Graph just shows where we've been the last couple of years on our revenues. The thing that I find of interest here, or that you might find of interest, is that the percent of federal aid of our total budget for this coming year is about half of what it's been the last couple of years because of all the funding that we got for COVID-related revenues. The property tax or local tax funding remains right around that 11%. The state aid is larger because of the smaller amount in federal. But for the most part, if we look back to pre-COVID budgets, you would see that our budget for next year is very much in line percentage-wise of where we get our funding. And then looking at our expenditures, we are making some assumptions, obviously, in this budget on where we will end up with contract settlements. That is the single largest portion of our expenditure budget. It's 80%. So this is the big unknown in our preliminary budget. We do know that we had an overall 2.6% health insurance increase. The very good news is we added, using our federal COVID funds, we added some really significant supports for our students. We added resource specialists, social workers, counselors, and what we're able to do because of that increase in our compensatory funding, these are all allowable positions in compensatory. So we're able to move all of the personnel who had been funded in our federal COVID funds out of that into compensatory. So positions that we really weren't sure if we were going to be able to keep once the federal funds ran out, we are going to be able to keep, and that's a big win for our school district. And it also prevents us from really seeing this big cliff that some districts are experiencing, where suddenly their federal funds have run out and they don't have anywhere to put those people. So that's creating some fairly significant reductions in some districts. No real significant staffing level changes. As you all know, we are adding the second school resource officers. So that's about a $60,000 expenditure increase. Utilities just don't seem to be coming down very quickly, so we've increased those by 5%. We've already increased for this current year by a pretty significant percentage. Our general liability insurance had a very large increase, 28%. Part of that is part of that is not just the general liability, it's also our cyber liability insurance. We've all been reading what's been happening. Those costs have gone up. We have had some experience claims that caused this increase, and just seeing across the board that insurance rates are going up for school districts. And then we're still in negotiations with our Albert Lea Transportation Company. I'm hoping to settle at about 5.5%. In our most recent discussions, they've got some real issues, the same as we do, as far as wanting to keep personnel, how they can do that. Their staff now also can apply for unemployment, which they've not been able to do in the past. It's a very significant increase for them. So we're still working through that. I don't know if we will end up at this 5.5%. And then looking, same kind of graph for expenditures. Again, not a lot changes as far as percent for the different things that we look at. We are always right around 80% on our payroll and benefits, purchase services, right around 13%. You can just see from year to year, the dollar amounts may change a little bit, but percent of a total budget, they remain fairly consistent. Food service, I sat with Chartwells, and they helped come up with our food service budget. This one is a difficult one right now. We're going to universal free meals, so that's kind of an unknown what that's going to look like. Also, at the time we were working on the budget, the federal government had not come out with their reimbursement rates yet for free and reduced, and that's a very big part of our revenue. So we've made, some good educated guesses on that budget. It is still a very, very healthy fund balance in our food service budget, and we are continuing to update our equipment. We're investing in some new dishwashers this summer, so that's very good. Community education, no real significant changes to staffing or programming. They've made some assumptions on staffing pay increases in their budget. Debt service fund, it's always just a factor of what are the payments scheduled for principal and interest. The health insurance, we know we gave ourselves a slight increase in premium, so that'll be a little bit of an increase in revenue, and we are expecting some expenditure increases just as medical trend continues to go up. So this is what it looks like. No surprises based on what I've told you that the most significant changes are. We are anticipating that we will end this next year at a 12.06% unassigned fund balance, so still above our 12% board policy. And then we've got food service, community ed, building fund. Again, that is the funds that we are using for our security upgrades. Doing a lot of work this summer. We'll kind of see when the bills come in for that. Debt service fund, our custodial fund, which is one scholarship, our self-insured internal service fund, and then the other post-employment benefits revocable trust fund. And then just kind of a couple final statements, factors impacting us. Minnesota made a really historical commitment to education in this last legislative session, and that certainly is going to be very advantageous for us to be able to maintain our fiscal good health for our school district. We are showing or anticipating steady to maybe slightly declining enrollment. We did have an enrollment study done this year by Hazel Reinhardt. She will be coming to a future board meeting to explain her findings. But her findings did show steady or slightly decreasing, which is really what we thought. And then the strategic planning process is really going to help provide us a roadmap to make sure that we align our funding to the goals that we identified through that process. So with that, again, I would ask that the board entertain a motion to approve the preliminary budget for next year.
Okay. Do I hear a moved by Bruce, seconded by Gary to approve the preliminary budget for 23-24. Any questions, further discussions? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much. I will leave these bound copies if anybody would like a copy of that.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next, first reading of education for homeless, and then quite a number of policies to review.
Yes.
By
Thanks
Kathy.
to Board Member Schindler and Hoffman for your compliments on our meeting. This meeting is just getting better and better. Thank you, Board Chair, SCORE, Superintendent, and board members. So what you see is that we do have a number of policies. This is part of our big review Superintendent Wagner and I attended a meeting in Rochester about a week ago about the upcoming policies. So as was asked at the policy committee meeting, are these policies the new changes with the legislature? And no, they are not. So these are the deep dive that MSBA has done into policies. And the last time we met in June, it is kind of the last of that deep dive. And we know there is going to be between 25 and 29 policy changes coming up due to the recent legislature. And some of those policies, as I was talking with Darcy, not all policies that come from MSBA are required and mandatory. So we'll look at those policies we currently have, the mandatory policies, and then what needs to move on next. So that's why we're here tonight, is to look at previous policies and changes to them. So, and thank you to the committee for taking a look at these previously. So
And,
moving forward,
Kathy,
yes.
if I might interrupt, there's a number of items here, and as we've done in the past, I suggest that we wait until they have all been described by Kathy.
Sure.
And then, unless some of you in the course of that presentation want to remove one of these and consider it separately, I suggest that we wait until Kathy is done with her presentation and then act on all of the policies at once.
Yeah. So
Okay?
yes, any questions on that? So you have two policies that we were going to bring forward for 3 readings. They're brand new. We did find out last week that due to legislative changes that we hold off on the overdose medication policy, so we'll bring that back for first reading in July. Starting with the homelessness policy, in 21-22, we had 36 students identified as homeless, and in 22-23, we have 101. And what this policy does, it helps us identify what does it mean to be homeless, and then our social workers help identify those students in the schools. Sheila Reby has done a lot of work on this with the social workers. Danny Bryant will be taking over some of Sheila's work. Our social workers still will work with students in the schools. Danny will do the paperwork piece, help process that, and help then carry through with determining services. So in your policy, you'll see a definition for homelessness. We'll put that up here in a second, right? It also talks about school enrollment and placements and families' rights. It talks about providing transportation. And most importantly, it's to ensure that these students are not isolated, that they receive an equal educational opportunity as any student. So I don't know, do we have that one? While she's working on that, a little bit about the overdose policy is some things in that now that we thought were optional are now mandated. So that's one of the reasons we'll be bringing that policy back.
Kathy, will these be published on our website, like the numbers like that?
The number of homeless students, I don't believe that's a requirement.
Where does someone find that?
So I don't believe it's really not something that, it has to do with enrollment, and I don't know if that is a number that MDE is requiring in the report card now.
So why I ask is sometimes we have to provide demographics for funding. When I say we,
Yeah,
Riverland's going
Sure.
after. And so sometimes they ask us about the homelessness rates in our school districts. So I've always had to not always, but when I've had to contact the district, I feel like if there's somewhere I can go look, or my team can go look, so we don't bother the staff, or would you rather that we did that?
well, Danny Bryant would have the most current number. It might be on the report card now. I think we'll have to look at that. So on MDE's site, under the report card, I believe it's there, and that's updated October 1st each year. But you wouldn't see numbers as they change throughout the year then until the
Right,
following
it's a point
October.
in time
Right.
that we have to provide.
And Director Nelson, just so you know, that end, if the end becomes too small, then it's identifiable, so it is removed. But yes, that would be part of our holistic report out.
So if you go down, if we can scroll down a little bit here, you'll see the definitions for homeless children and how they're defined by the McKinney-Vento Act. Children and youth who are sharing housing of other persons due to loss of housing, economic hardship, similar reasons. You certainly can read that yourself. As we go down, students whose primary nighttime residence is a public, that is a public or private place not designated for regular sleeping, children and youth who are living in cars, parks, public spaces, abandoned buildings, substandard housing, migratory children, et cetera. So the definitions are there, and we've already submitted this policy as a draft coming to the board tonight as part of our statewide reporting. So then goes into school selection and enrollment, and these students have, you know, if they are, for instance, from another community in the county or the next county over, but they're here for whatever reason, and they want to be back in that school, we want to work with them to stay in their home school until other, you know, until maybe their circumstance changes. So it's really most often self-identified, but really our school social workers and our counselors do a lot of work trying to help families and find out that information to not, for the sole reason of providing them support, so.
So Kathy, then we would have to provide transportation to Mankato if someone wanted to live here and then want to go to school in Mankato?
So we would work with the home school district to see what would be the best way to do that. So not necessarily,
We provide transportation to their school of origin. If a student is become homeless in Mankato, Mankato, we would work with Mankato to provide transportation if they want to continue to, within reason. What is best for a child, considering their age? Is a 45-minute bus ride reasonable? That would disrupt, but I've worked with school districts and we're always able to work out a compromise to not disrupt their learning.
and there's as we go down here, there's a dispute procedure that is prescribed for the superintendent by the Department of Education, So this is a mandatory policy for us, given our number of students who have, meet the definition of homelessness. So this is a policy that will be up for reading 3 times before approved. So this is reading number 1. If you have any questions on it, Sheila has done this work the last year and guided it, and Danny Bryant will be taking that piece over. So as I said, the overdose medication policy will be coming. If you go back up one. This policy will put into motion the planning for overdose medication for schools. So it will prescribe some new pieces. Just looked at it late in the day today. It was an option for districts, and now it's being mandated. So, and then there's some change in some legislation for our school nurses. So we want some time to look at that. We know that come August 1st, there might be some more changes due to Narcan being available over the counter. So you may see this one come back. But to have a policy in place so that we can move forward is important, So the next list, so these are policies, and I just want to talk briefly about them, and then we'll take a look at them. But those that have yellow, we know will come back for review. They are on the list for review from the last legislative session. But we want to move them forward because there are some significant changes that we want to move forward with now as we begin planning for the next school year. So our 601, which is our curriculum and instructional goals, is changed substantially. Pretty much the entire policy, which was under No Child Left Behind and previous Goals 2000, is now aligns with the world's best workforce. And this has come before you in bits and pieces, and now there is a full revamp of that policy, aligning with the world's best workforce. Defines working with academic standards, talks about assessment, so we'll look at that one in a second. 201 Very few changes. It's the legal status of the board, and it just updates statutory references and retitling of statutes. Employment background checks, again, few changes, updates statutory references. Family and medical leave, there are some updates to military references in that policy. As you've seen in other policies, instead of just saying US code, it spells out United States code. Minnesota code, it spells out Minnesota. Some minor changes there. It gives school districts an option, and we talked a little bit about this at the policy meeting, that if an employee is out on a leave for family and medical leave and they decide that they want to come back 2 weeks before the end of the school term, it does give school districts options to work with those employees. We've not adjusted anyone's leave to keep them out longer. We would like them back, but there is a change in the law that that will come into policy. It does clarify what parental care is, and it does identify the district as the employer in the case for school districts. Policy 417, chemical use and abuse, it addresses medical cannabis, so it actually addresses the changes you'll see in this policy, address changes from the last legislative season. Controlled substances, it allows schools, if they prefer to go to that full community-type school, to have a chemical abuse program, and it lays out very clearly what that looks like. We do not have that, but it will be in policy. And then it talks about providing students with drug-free awareness education. A lot is being struck from that policy so that it gives school districts more freedom to choose what those would look like. And interestingly enough, it allows specifically schools to bring back DARE if they so desire. Why that, I don't know why that specifically is in there, but drug-free workplace, drug-free school. This addresses non-intoxicating cannabinoids. I think I said that correctly. And that it comes out of the last legislative season and session, and you will see that is in yellow, and we will be seeing some more changes to that. 420, students or employees with sexually transmitted infections. The biggest change in this is that employees who would be exposed to hepatitis B, school districts are required to vaccinate those employees at no cost to them. There's a series of vaccinations. And then some statutory reference updates. School discipline, you will see a small number of changes in the one coming forward tonight. It addresses nuisance devices, which include phones, and some changes to, and it's a very small change, some statutory references, but there will be big changes to this one coming forward out of the legislature. We did hear that a week ago, so you'll see that one again. Technology acceptable use, everything in the policy we've already implemented. They were implemented this past year. So updates taken the last school year about off-campus use of social media in particular, and if there's a nexus with school, how schools can be responsible for helping to deal with that. On our website, we have a lengthy list for parents to review all the notifications from our tech providers and our software providers, our assessment providers, how they're using student data. There's in the policy limits on screen time for preschoolers and kindergartners, and we have implemented that this year. Also limits on how we can monitor students using computers. Years ago, we used to be able to have the teacher in the computer lab be able to go to every student's computer from their computer and see what they're doing, and that's no longer, we're not able to do that anymore. So that was put into place this year, and we had it in one lab this year, and it was taken out. So we can monitor, for instance, where a student's computer device may be. So they come in and they say, you know, my device is lost. We do have a tracking on that, and we can see, well, it looks like it's on or about Gary Schindler's house, or, you know, my house, or it's at the Y. But we can't go and look to see what the student is doing at any given time and watch what they're doing on that computer. So some updates to that, and I think there's only a small number coming forward in the next round. Very little on student use in parking of motor vehicles. It just updates some statutory reference and renaming of statutes. 528, so you saw 522 a year ago, if you remember, on the Title IX, and this policy references that policy, and therefore it just references the title change, so not much in there. School calendar and school day 602, this is not a mandatory policy. Lots of districts do not have it. It's recommended by MSBA in particular because it addresses e-learning days, and so we are adding e-learning language to that as recommended by MSBA. And then some more language passed in the legislature on e-learning, so that one will be coming back. But we would like that e-learning language so that we don't have to do an MOU every year with the ALEA as has been required, and now you can put it in policy. And then we'll address the new changes coming up. So we can show each of these policies individually if you like. These are the major changes. I had a few questions from people. I think we answered. If there's any more questions from individuals.
You've all had an opportunity to scrutinize these
Scintillating policies,
yeah,
yes, thank you.
So you've had an opportunity to review these in greater detail, if you like. I heard nobody suggest that we remove and treat any of them separately, so I would entertain a motion to approve all of these policy updates.
So moved.
Moved by Davy. Do I hear a second? Seconded by Bruce. Now, any further discussion, questions, concerns? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion to approve the policies passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Now, number 10, closed session, board to evaluate the performance of an individual who is subject to its authority. I need a motion for the board to go into a closed session.
I'll second.
Moved by Kim, seconded by Gary. Any discussion, questions? All those in favor? Aye. We are in closed session.